The mid-Hudson Valley in upstate New York is known for both its lush foliage and rich, fertile soil. Going far beyond the apparent beauty that's visible in the mid-Hudson Valley region, farmers all pride themselves on the ethical and humane raising of the animals that they tend to in the fields. From cattle to sheep to chickens, all of the animals are cared for in a way that helps to promote regenerative agriculture for the mid-Hudson Valley region. Their collective endeavors are no small feat as they strive to bring awareness to the necessary preservation of the land's biodiversity through sustainable and regenerative agriculture. The region's inhabitants benefit from the sweeping vistas to the many farms and farmers markets the area has to offer. For example, this farmers market in Hudson, New York, draws visitors from far and wide all year round to purchase the many fruits and vegetables available for sale. It's not only fruits and vegetables that are the main attraction at the farmers market, but the vast array of farmstead cheeses from animals raised ethically and humanely here in the mid-Hudson Valley region. Farms such as Kinderhook Farms in Kinderhook, New York, take pride in the raising of their animals. Also, MX Morningstar, found in Claverack, New York, not far away from Churchtown Dairy, takes pride in the agricultural practices used to grow their fruits and vegetables for the region's inhabitants. On a cold November morning, we found ourselves on our way to Churchtown Dairy to speak with the head dairy farmer. One cannot help but take in the unimaginable beauty found in the town of Claverack in the form of bales of hay as we spot the sign for Churchtown Dairy, which is our final destination as we forge deeper into the town of Claverack, New York. Upon our approach to Churchtown Dairy, as we continue to take in the stunning views, it is not hard to imagine why the farmers in this region strive to preserve the biodiverse nature of the land in which they choose to set up their farming practices. The Telltale Barn, commissioned by Abby Rockefeller, is visible just before you arrive at the entry gates. For those of you not familiar with New York State Department of Agriculture's law and policy regarding milk and dairy consumption, and in particular that of raw milk, I've included some data directly from their website in order for you to familiarize yourself with the practices in place on the books. Here you can see the laws and policy on the books for raw milk production as mandated by New York State's Department of Agriculture. And this in turn will help you to better understand what it is that raw milk dairy farms such as Churchtown Dairy endeavor to do in terms of reforming and promoting regenerative agricultural practices for dairy farms. The New York State law mandates that any raw milk can only be sold from the farm store, meaning that it has to be sold directly from the premise. And aside from that, they must be in possession of a certain handler's license in order to be able to sell raw milk from that location to the public. The animals also undergo rigorous testing as well as the milk that they produce. As noted from Churchtown Dairy's website, located on 250 acres in Claverack, New York, the Churchtown Dairy manages a 28-cow biodynamic dairy herd with about an equal number of young stock and beef cattle. Comprised of brown Swiss, Jersey, and Guernsey stock, our cows eat a primarily grass-fed diet and are given a life as in tune as possible with their natural rhythm. Calves are kept with their mothers and run with the herd, causing a slight decrease in milk production, but also reducing stress on both the mother and the calf, and thereby contributing to the harmony of the herd. Calves who are unable to be kept as replacement heifers become part of the beef herd and given the same care and attention as is given to the dairy cows. We also keep a number of pigs who feast on excess milk and whey from cheese production, as well as grain and table scraps. We strive to create a whole system farm in which nothing is wasted and all is either eaten or properly composted. Working with the rhythms of the land, the sun, and the farmers, we work to create a farm that is both beautiful and healthy for the land, the animals, the farmers, the water, and our surrounding community. Prior to my meeting with Michael McDonald, the head dairy farmer at Churchtown Dairy, I took a stroll through the innermost parts of the barn to see the milking process as it goes at 4 p.m. every afternoon at Churchtown Dairy. Though comfortable with being interviewed for this class project, he was a little uncomfortable about being on camera. So unfortunately, you all will have to make do with my voice in lieu of Michael McDonald's, and I will convey to the best of my ability the notes that I took diligently on what brought him to Churchtown Dairy and what his vision is for this farm and how that relates to milk policy and dairy policies concerning raw milk in New York State. In the words of Michael McDonald, he's been the head dairy farmer at Churchtown Dairy for approximately 2.5 years, having arrived here by way of a smaller farm in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. It was his love of field work and animals, as well as his dedication to promoting organic and regenerative agricultural farming practices that led him here. As a graduate of Cornell, Michael McDonald studied science and technology as well as government. He then spent 2 years in Washington, D.C. actually working on agricultural policy, which in turn led him to wanting to be more involved on a grassroots level. His studies at Cornell were in fact about the philosophy of science and science policy. Looking at policy surrounding organic agriculture, he said there needed to be another approach to agriculture, as the word culture is in the word agriculture and therefore imperative in its daily practice. With agriculture and culture going hand in hand, it was realized that it is important that this represent the values and practices of farms going forward. As somebody that primarily makes hay for the consumption of the farm animals at Churchtown Dairy, Michael noted that capital in terms of the equipment needed to make hay is not something that is readily available to all farms and farmers alike. Making hay and grazing are two separate things. However, the cows graze in the pastures with a focus on timing and frequency of grazing, which is extensive and critical as fences and water lines and temporary fences are installed and able to ensure the viability of the farm. Grazing is one of the ways to develop good soil and maximize what the pastures can provide. When asked how the vast majority of customers and visitors to Churchtown Dairy learn of their farm operations, he is quick to say that it's usually via word of mouth. As taken from their website, for most of the 20th century, 3 families operated independent dairies on the 250 acres that now comprise the Churchtown Dairy. In the 1980s, however, with milk prices in decline and the passage of the Food Security Act of 1985, establishing a dairy herd buyout program, many small-scale dairy farms folded, including the 3 operating on the land that is now Churchtown Dairy. At the same time, much of the farmland in Columbian County was being sold off to developers to create housing and commerce areas. With a wish to preserve farmland and the resources to do so, Peggy Rockefeller began purchasing farms in the Hudson Valley as they came on the market, keeping them safe from development. In all, she amassed more than 3,000 acres of arable land in the area, including the 250 acres that now makes up Churchtown Dairy. In their return to Derry, Peggy passed away in 1996, and for 12 years, the acreage she had amassed continued to be farmed conventionally, kept largely for grain and hayfields. In 2008, Peggy's husband, David Rockefeller, began the process of turning the property over to his children. Peggy and David's oldest daughter, Abby Rockefeller, requested the standalone 250-acre parcel in Churchtown. With a passion for bringing beauty to farming, Abby approached builder Rick Anderson from Martha's Vineyard to bring her vision to life. She asked him to build her a dairy farm, and as the story goes, she gave him one command: it has to be beautiful. Rick and Abby spent the next 2 years traveling to dairy farms throughout the Northeast, seeing some farms they liked and many more they didn't. Finally, in 2012, the plans for the dairy were complete. The center line was put in and the construction began. Now the Churchtown Dairy is home to 28 dairy cows and their calves, a beef herd, and a handful of pigs. 12 employees manage the farm, the garden, and the site and store. Drawing on the words of Bill Copperwaith, who said, "Beauty is a birthright, and where there is no beauty, there is great danger. We strive to imbue all our work with beauty." When asked what makes them noteworthy or exceptionally different, Michael McDonald was quick to say that they work to be not just efficient, but more effective. They're just getting started in their initiative that is to be organic, regenerative, and a biodiverse farm in the mid-Hudson Valley region. Also, as to be one of the purveyors of raw milk for consumers in the area.